Hello and welcome. This is your instructor, Dennis Westman, and today I'm going to talk about Excel Unit I, which is automating worksheet tasks. Now, if you follow along with me like you usually do in the textbook, we begin on page 202. And essentially, this unit is dealing with what's called macros, which is essentially a name given to a set of instructions that helps automate a task or tasks. So essentially what you do is you record a macro, and then anytime you want to do those series of steps some other time, you run the macro or play the macro, and that allows you to redo or recreate those steps over and over and over again without having to do those individually one at a time. Very, very, very helpful. And so on the first page, page 202, talks a little bit about what is a macro and then how to plan a macro. 204 talks about enabling a macro, and a key point here is that macros can sometimes contain viruses, and so you want to be sure that you trust the workbook that has the macro included in it, because there is a box that pops up that wants you to enable the content and enable the macro. So you want to be careful to just not enable any macros if you're unsure of who the author is or what the origin is. On page 206 talks about recording a macro, and essentially what you do is you push record, and then you just follow the steps that you would do to create or perform those various tasks. When you're done, you stop, and then bam, that's it. Your macro is now recorded, and you have recorded those series of steps that actually do or perform the tasks that you were wanting to do. To run the macro is talked about on page 208. And it's pretty simple. You just go to the Developer tab and you go to the Macros button, and what you're going to see is you're going to see a listing of all the macros that are recorded in that workbook, and then you're going to choose the one you want to run, and then you'll just actually run that macro. Very, very straightforward. You can also edit a macro, which is on page 210. And the coding that's actually used for a macro is called Visual Basic for Applications, or VBA. And using VBA, you can actually edit the macro, make some changes, add some prompts, those kinds of things. Now, we're not going to get too heavy into that, but it is helpful to know sort of the underpinnings about what a macro is actually created in. And then you also have on 212 being able to assign keyboard shortcuts to it. So maybe you want to just do like Shift LP, and that will run the macro. It's very handy. You can assign it that keyboard combination and perform the macro. Page 214 talks about a personal macro, and this personal macro workbook is a particular macro that's not necessarily tied to a specific workbook, but is available to you in any of the workbooks that you may open, and that gives you all of the options of that macro throughout any of the workbooks that you might currently have open. Page 216 talks about assigning a macro to a button. So you can assign it a keyboard shortcut, but you can also assign it a little button, and using that button is kind of handy. You can go in and you can click the button, and then it does whatever sort of steps that you're wanting to do. Now, as always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me or post them to the general class chat discussion area. I appreciate you watching this video. Thank you, and have a great day.